The night Noelle told me she wanted something she had never told anyone, I did the worst possible thing. I went home and pretended I had not heard her. That Saturday, I got back to my apartment a little after 7. I had spent most of the day carrying tools through narrow hallways and explaining to people why a machine that had been making terrible noises for 6 months could not be fixed in 10 minutes. My last job was a washer on the 3rd floor of a house with no usable handrail. I had to carry a replacement motor up the stairs, install it, then carry the old one back down while the homeowner stood behind me asking whether I was sure the machine would work. By the time I reached my building, I wanted canned soup, television, and no conversation. I had barely stepped inside my apartment when someone knocked. 3 quick taps, then 2 slower ones. Noelle. I opened the door without taking off my work boots. She stood there in a green coat, holding a dark shirt on a hanger. No, I said. I haven't asked anything yet. You're holding the shirt you made me buy. You look good in this shirt. That is not a reason to trust you. She pushed the hanger toward me. There was blue food coloring on 2 of her fingers. We're going upstairs. I live here. To the roof. I also live under the roof. She stared at me for a second. It's Marcy's birthday. There are people from the bakery, some people from the building, and food you didn't heat inside a metal can. I have had enough people today. You've had enough people all week. That too. Her joking expression changed a little. Not completely, but enough that I noticed. She knew about the complaint from the customer on Thursday. Another company had damaged the floor while moving a refrigerator, but because I was the last technician in the house, I got blamed for it. My boss believed me. The photos proved it was not my fault. None of that stopped me from replaying the conversation every night. Noelle leaned against my doorframe. Sometimes you want quiet, she said. Sometimes you're disappearing. Tonight feels like the second one. I looked down at my boots. She lifted the shirt again. 20 minutes, she said. You stand near the wall. You drink something. You prove to everyone that the man on the 4th floor is not a rumor. I have met these people. You have repaired things for these people. That is not the same. I should have refused again. Instead, 10 minutes later, I was following her toward the elevator in the dark shirt. The roof deck was more crowded than I expected, but it was not some big fancy event. There were folding tables near the door, paper lanterns tied to the railing, grocery store wine, plastic cups, and trays of pastries from the bakery. A portable speaker sat on a chair and played music louder than necessary. Beyond the rail, the Milwaukee skyline looked clear in the cold air. Noelle knew almost everyone. I knew enough people to get trapped in short conversations. For the first hour, she did not hover over me. She moved between groups, told stories, fixed a paper lantern that kept falling, and cut pieces of cake for people who were already holding pastries. Every few minutes, she checked on me. She raised her eyebrows. I lifted my cup. She pointed once toward the stairwell. I shook my head. That was our system. We had been using versions of it for years. Later, when the music got louder, Noelle appeared beside me and said, "Come on." "Where?" "Somewhere I can hear myself make fun of you." She led me to the far side of the roof, away from the speaker. We stopped beside the metal railing. The air was colder there, and I could hear traffic below. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Are you still thinking about that customer?" "No. You are a terrible liar." "I'm an average liar." "You reorganized your kitchen cabinets yesterday." I looked at her. "How do you know that?" "You left the screwdriver set on the counter when I brought you coffee." "That proves nothing." "It proves you were upset enough to organize canned vegetables." I laughed, even though I did not want to. Noelle moved closer because the music rose behind us. Her shoulder touched my arm. "One unfair complaint does not erase years of good work," she said. "I hate when people tell me I did everything I could." "I know. Then why say it?" "Because I waited until we were on a roof, and you had fewer escape routes." I turned toward her. She smiled at first, but then the smile faded. There was something different in her face. She looked nervous, which was rare. Noelle usually covered nervousness with 5 jokes and a story about a customer. This time, she did not. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. "I want something I've never told anyone," she said quietly. I thought I had misunderstood her. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, 3 people came toward the railing. One of Noelle's coworkers called her name and started talking about the cake. Another person asked me whether I could look at a dryer that took 2 cycles to finish. The moment closed so quickly that I almost convinced myself it had not happened. Noelle changed immediately. She laughed, stole a cracker from my plate, and complained that the birthday cake had been changed twice that morning. She introduced me to a new bakery employee. She acted completely normal. I did my best to do the same. On the elevator ride down, Noelle talked about a customer who wanted a cake to look cheerful but serious. I asked what that meant, she said. She said, "You'll know when you see it." That is useful. Very. I almost drew a smiling accountant. I laughed at the right places, but I kept hearing the sentence from the roof. When the elevator reached my floor, the doors opened slowly. I almost asked her. I was close. Then Noelle looked at me and said, "Get some sleep, Jim." I stepped into the hallway. The doors closed between us. Inside my apartment, I stood in the kitchen without turning on the television. Then I started remembering things I had never allowed myself to connect. I remembered the soup first. A few months earlier, I had come home after a service call that went badly. A refrigerator compressor had failed, the replacement part was delayed, and the customer had spent almost an hour blaming me for problems that started before I arrived. Noelle showed up with chicken soup in a bakery container. She did not ask me to explain anything. She sat at my kitchen table with a box of practice cookies and decorated small flowers while I stared out the window. Every few minutes, she slid a finished cookie toward me. We stayed like that for almost 2 hours. At the time, I thought she was being a good friend. Then I remembered the night she fell asleep on my couch. She had an early shift the next morning, but she stayed because I was upset after a difficult call with my older brother. I filled out repair reports at the table while she watched television with the volume low. When I finished, she was asleep with one hand under her cheek and her shoes still on. I put a blanket over her and went to bed. Again, I called it friendship. There was also the sugar figure. Noelle had left a box of practice decorations in my refrigerator. Inside were flowers, small animals, tiny chairs, and one little person wearing a gray work shirt and holding a wrench. It looked enough like me that I laughed. When I asked about it, she said, "I needed practice making ordinary people." I told her the figure had too much hair. She told me to stop criticizing the artist. That memory felt different now. So did the way she sometimes looked at me when she thought I was not paying attention. I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think clearly. That usually helped with work. A machine had symptoms. You checked one part, then another. You ruled things out. This was not a machine. Still, I started making a list in my head. Noelle was the person I called when a job went badly. She was the first person I sent a photo to when I saw something funny. If I did not want to eat alone, I went upstairs. If my car made a strange sound, she came outside and listened even though she knew nothing about cars. If her day was terrible, she sat on my counter and complained while I made coffee. I knew which bakery customers made her anxious. I knew she played the same 3 songs when she had a large cake order. I knew which side of my couch she used. I knew when she was about to cry because her voice became too calm. That was not casual attention. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was making coffee. Noelle had sent a picture of burned toast. "Still alive?" she wrote. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I answered, "Barely. That toast looks worse." She replied with a photo of the same toast in the trash. We continued like nothing had happened. That afternoon, she asked if I wanted leftover soup. I had no plans. I told her I had service reports to finish. The lie was small, but she knew me too well. "Okay," she wrote. "Don't become part of your toolbox." I did not answer. For the next 2 days, I avoided the 5th floor. I left early for work. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. On Monday evening, I accepted a late service call that another technician had already offered to handle. The dryer only needed a new heating element. I finished in less than an hour and then sat in the service van outside the customer's house, looking at Noelle's last message. I was not only afraid that she had feelings for me, I was afraid she might say the words out loud and force me to answer. By Tuesday, my apartment had never been cleaner. I organized tools I had already organized. I cleaned the refrigerator shelves. I moved a stack of mail from one side of the counter to the other. At 6:30, I finally stopped. I went upstairs. For the first time in years, I knocked instead of using my spare key. Noelle opened the door after a few seconds. She wore sweatpants and an old bakery shirt. Blue food coloring covered 2 fingers and part of her palm. Her apartment looked wrong. There were unused decorating bags on the counter. An unfinished cake sat near the window. Several containers of icing had hardened around the edges. A blanket was twisted on the couch, and a mug of cold tea sat on the table. "You knocked," she said. "I know. That's strange. I know." She stepped aside and let me in. I stayed near the door. What did you mean on the roof? Noelle looked toward the kitchen. I was being dramatic. No. Jim, please don't do that. She folded her arms. Do what? Make me believe I imagined it. Her face changed. I asked, was it about me? She did not answer. She did not need to. I felt my chest tighten, even though part of me had already known. Noelle sat on the arm of the couch and stared at the floor. It has been almost 8 months, she said. I leaned against the wall. 8 months. Do not say it like I have been running a secret experiment. I'm trying to understand. You're counting. I'm not counting. You have the same face you use when someone describes a leaking dishwasher. I opened my mouth, then stopped. She was right. I had already started listing moments in my head. The soup, the couch, the sugar figure, the way she looked at me. I said some of them out loud. Noelle became more uncomfortable with every example. Finally, she stood. Please stop. I did. You're making it sound like evidence, she said. Like you can line up every stupid thing I did and find the failed part. I'm sorry. She looked away. I took a step back and lowered my voice. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. That makes 2 of us. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Noelle picked up the cold tea and carried it to the sink, even though it did not need to be moved. You're not someone I could just avoid, she said. You live downstairs. You're my closest friend. You're my emergency contact. You've seen me cry over cake icing and wear the same sweater 3 days in a row. I almost smiled, but she looked too serious. If I told you and you didn't feel the same, she continued, I would still see you in the elevator. I would still hear you come home. I would still want to knock on your door when something happened. She gripped the edge of the counter. I didn't want to hand you my feelings and make you responsible for making me feel better. I didn't come because I feel sorry for you. She finally looked at me. I know. I need time. Her expression tightened, but she nodded. I need to understand what I've been refusing to name, I said. That's different from saying no. Noelle let out a slow breath. Okay. I won't hide forever. You did hide for 2 days. I said forever. That earned a small smile. Then it disappeared. I'm not going anywhere because you need time, she said. I nodded. We stood close enough that moving forward would have changed everything. Neither of us moved. I left before uncertainty could make the decision for us. The next morning, I spent 20 minutes inside a dryer cabinet thinking about Noelle. The machine had stopped heating. The customer stood behind me and kept asking whether I had found the problem. I had. The heating element had failed. That part was simple. What was happening upstairs in my building was not. While I tightened the final connection, I kept hearing Noelle say that she had wanted a real relationship with me for almost 8 months. 8 months. That meant spring. It meant the time she brought coffee to my van because I had an early call near the bakery. It meant the night we ordered takeout and she rested her feet across my lap without either of us commenting on it. It meant all those ordinary evenings I had never questioned because they felt easy. I finished the dryer, explained the repair, carried my tool case back to the van, and sat behind the wheel. The answer was not hidden. I had already built most of my life around her. I knew where she would be after work. I knew what she would order. I knew when she needed jokes and when she needed silence. I knew how empty my apartment felt when we had not spoken all day. I had mistaken familiarity for the absence of romance. The truth was almost the opposite. She felt familiar because I trusted her more than anyone. I finished my last call early and drove home. When I reached the 5th floor, I did not knock gently. Noelle opened the door wearing the same old bakery shirt from the night before. Her hair was tied up, and there was a streak of white icing near her wrist. She looked at me carefully. Did you forget something? Yes. What? The obvious answer. She did not move. I said, it has been you for longer than I knew. For once, Noelle had no quick reply. I stepped inside. I kept thinking romance was supposed to feel new, I said. Like some big change. You never felt new to me. That sounds promising so far. I'm doing badly. A little. I took a breath. You feel familiar because you're the person I trust most. You're already the person I want to call. You're already the person I look for. I think I used the word friendship because it felt safe. Noelle stared at me for another second. Then she stepped forward and put her arms around me. We had hugged plenty of times before. This felt almost the same. Her cheek was against my shoulder. My hands settled at her back. Neither of us rushed. The difference was that we both understood it. When we pulled apart, she said, so what happens now? I think I ask you on a date. A real one. That was the plan. She narrowed her eyes. You had a plan? I had part of one. Very romantic. Our first official date was 2 nights later at a small diner near Lake Michigan. We had eaten together hundreds of times, but the word date made both of us strange. I changed shirts twice. Noelle wore a black sweater and dark jeans. She looked normal, which somehow made me more nervous. We took the slow elevator even though we could have met in the lobby. Inside, she looked at the floor numbers and said, "Should we pretend we don't know each other? I don't think we could manage that. We should ask first date questions." At the diner, she folded her hands on the table. "So, Jim, what do you do for work?" "I tell people that turning a machine off and on is not always a complete repair." "Interesting. Any hobbies?" "I carry heavy boxes and complain about parking." I asked her what she did. "I make cakes at work," she said. "Then go home and complain about making cakes." The jokes helped. After dinner, we walked near the lake. The air was cold, and Noelle kept her hands inside her sleeves. I reached for one of them. She looked down when our fingers joined. Then she smiled. Over the next few weeks, the relationship changed less than I expected and more than I understood. Her mug appeared in my cupboard. Peppermint tea showed up beside my coffee. A charger stayed near the couch. Her cardigan spent 3 days over the back of a chair. Cake sketches appeared on my refrigerator under a magnet shaped like Wisconsin. My things moved upstairs too. A spare work shirt. A screwdriver. My favorite coffee mug. A pair of slippers Noelle said made me look 80 years old. We still had takeout. We still complained about work. We still sat quietly when one of us had a bad day. The difference was that now I kissed her before leaving. Now she leaned against me without pretending it was an accident. Now we had to say things we had avoided as friends. The first problem came at a bowling night organized by my company. Noelle came with me. Amy, one of our dispatchers, spent several minutes talking to me near the lanes. She laughed at a story about a refrigerator call and touched my arm while she was speaking. I did not think anything of it. Noelle did. She did not create a scene. She became quieter. On the drive home, she watched the streetlights through the passenger window. "Did Amy bother you?" I asked. "No." I waited. Noelle sighed. "Yes. A little." "Why?" "She likes you. She is friendly with everyone." "I know." She rubbed her hands together. "I felt jealous, and I hate it. I don't want to become a difficult girlfriend who gets upset every time someone talks to you." I kept my eyes on the road. "You told me instead of acting like nothing was wrong." "Barely. Barely still counts." She looked at me. "We're learning," I said. This was easy when neither of us had to admit what we could lose. Noelle nodded slowly. Then she said, "I still don't like her." "That is also allowed." She laughed, and the tension eased. Several weeks later, I came home from work and heard something hard hit the floor in Noelle's apartment above me. Then hurried footsteps. I sent her a message. No answer. I called. Nothing. I went upstairs and knocked. Noelle opened the door with red eyes and her phone in one hand. A broken mug was near the couch. Tea had spread across the floor. I looked at her. "What happened?" For a moment, she could not answer. Then she said, "It's my dad." I stepped inside and closed the door. Her father, Paul, had been going through medical tests for several weeks. Noelle had known something might be wrong. She had told me none of it. "The results came back," she said. "He needs treatment in Madison." Her voice became too calm. That was how I knew she was close to falling apart. "I didn't want this to become the beginning of us," she said. "Hospitals, family problems, all of it. I didn't want you to feel like you had to help." I was hurt that she had carried it alone. But that moment was not about my hurt. "When are you going?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning." "Then I'm driving." "You have appointments." "I can move them. You don't have to walk into all of this." I took her hand. "I did not choose you only for the easy shift." Noelle looked down at our hands. Then she held mine tighter. We left before sunrise in my service van because my car had decided the previous week that starting was optional. Noelle sat in the passenger seat with an overnight bag between her feet. Toolboxes, replacement hoses, and appliance parts filled the back. We stopped for 2 coffees at a gas station outside Milwaukee. She took one sip and made a face. "This tastes like someone described coffee to hot water." "You bought it." I was under pressure. For the first hour, she talked almost without stopping. She told me stories about growing up near Madison. She complained about road signs. She rated every farm we passed based on whether she would trust the owners to make pie. I knew what she was doing. I let her do it. Eventually, she ran out of small subjects. At a red light, I placed my hand over hers. She turned her hand and held mine until the light changed. Her parents lived in a modest house outside Madison. The front porch leaned slightly to one side, and a plastic planter sat near the steps with nothing growing in it. Her mother, Denise, opened the door before we knocked. Noelle went straight into her arms. I stayed near the porch holding the bag because I was not sure where I belonged yet. Denise looked over Noelle's shoulder at me. "You're Jim." "Yes. I've heard your name for years." Noelle pulled back. "Only good things." "Mostly," Denise said. Paul was resting in the living room. He looked tired, but he sat up when we entered. "So," he said, "you're the man who repairs everything. My success rate is lower with people." Paul nodded. "Honesty is a good start." There was nothing useful I could say about the appointment, so I did small things. I carried boxes from the garage. I made coffee. I fixed a loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet after Denise mentioned it had been crooked for months. Later, I drove all of us to the hospital. The waiting room had stiff chairs, a television with the sound off, and a vending machine that kept rejecting dollar bills. Noelle sat beside me with both hands wrapped around a paper cup. When the nurse called Paul's name, we followed him down the hallway. The doctor explained that the illness was serious and the treatment would be difficult. There would be repeated appointments, medication, travel, uncertain weeks, and changes depending on how Paul responded. There was also a clear plan. Treatment would begin soon. The doctor gave them cautious reasons to hope. Noelle asked practical questions. Denise wrote everything down. Paul made one quiet joke that nobody really laughed at. I stayed silent unless someone asked me something. After the appointment, Noelle held herself together until we reached the hallway. Then she turned toward me and gripped the front of my shirt. "There's a plan," she said. "Yes. There's at least a plan." I put my arms around her near the vending machines. I did not tell her everything would be fine. I did not know that. I just held her while people walked past us. That was when I understood something I had missed before. Love was not only finally admitting that I wanted her. It was not the diner, holding hands by the lake, or finding her mug beside mine. It was standing in an uncomfortable hallway when I could not repair anything. It was staying anyway. That evening, back at her parents' house, Noelle sat beside me on the porch steps. "I thought having you here would feel strange," she said. "Does it?" "No." She rested her head against my shoulder. "It feels like you were supposed to come." On the drive back to Milwaukee the next day, she apologized for hiding everything. "You don't have to make yourself easy all the time," I said. "I know. You say that, but you keep deciding which parts of your life I'm allowed to see." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't want to become a burden. You don't get to make that decision for me." She nodded. Then she looked at me. "And you don't get to disappear when you need quiet." That seems unrelated. It is completely related. I sighed. "Fine. Fine means yes." "Yes." Over the next several weeks, Noelle made regular trips to Madison. I went when my schedule allowed. When I could not go, I called without asking her to give me a full report. Sometimes she wanted to talk. Sometimes she only wanted to hear me complain about a dishwasher pump. Paul's early treatment results were encouraging, but nobody acted like the difficult part was over. Back in Milwaukee, our apartments started functioning like one home divided by a staircase. Noelle worked on cake designs at my kitchen table while I completed service reports beside her. She left dinner warming when my calls ran late. I picked her up from the bakery after large weekend orders. One evening, I came home and found her sitting at my table. A small lamp was on. A simple pasta dinner waited near the stove. Her cake sketches covered one side of the table, and she had moved my reports carefully to the other. Her tea sat beside my coffee mug. I looked around the apartment. Her cardigan hung over a chair. Peppermint tea filled half a cupboard shelf. Her bakery schedule was attached to the refrigerator. A pair of her shoes sat near the door. My apartment already looked shared. Noelle glanced up. "Why are you staring at the room?" "I'm thinking. That usually creates work for both of us." I set down my tool case. "Move in with me." She froze. I continued before I could lose my nerve. "Not because it's convenient. I want the rushed mornings and late shifts. I want service calls, family worries, quiet dinners, boring weekdays, and bad moods. I want all of it." Noelle stared at me for several seconds. Then she said, "You finally diagnosed the obvious problem. The repair took longer than expected." She stood and walked toward me. "Yes," she said. Then, because this was us, we spent the next hour discussing rent, storage, furniture, personal space, and whether my apartment could survive all her cake supplies. It was not a dramatic ending. It was better. It was practical, slightly awkward, and real. A few months earlier, I had thought Noelle was the safest friendship in my life. I had been wrong. She was the life I had already chosen before I was brave enough to call it love.